A victory by Republican Scott Brown in the special election tomorrow in Massachusetts could leave the health care bill dead in its tracks. Republican lawyers have looked into the state's election laws. They say once the polls close, Senator Paul Kirk is no longer a senator, whether or not his successor is actually certified by the state. This would leave Democrats one vote shy of stopping a GOP filibuster. Fred Barnes, the executive editor of the Weekly Standard, joins us. He's a Fox News contributor. He's got the inside scoop on the story. Tell us, Fred, what the lawyers say.
Well, what they say is actually pretty convincing, and Democrats may just be victims of the way they wrote the law, allowing the governor of Massachusetts to appoint a successor to Teddy Kennedy when he died last August. And they wrote the law that said the appointee, which is Paul Kirk in this case, could serve only until the election and qualification, that's a direct quote, election and qualification of a successor. Well, if Brown is elected tomorrow, wins the election, that'll do with that part, and the qualification part is not the same, the lawyers say anyway, as certification. And qualifications for a senator are in the Constitution. They must be 30 years old. They must be an American citizen for, I think, 9 years and be a resident of the state in which they're elected. Yeah. Well, on those three, Scott Brown qualifies. So that would mean that at the end of the day, as you stated it, at the end of the day tomorrow, Paul Kirk would no longer be a senator with a vote.
Yeah, you know, after I read your column, persuasive as always, I did look at the statute, and I think, quite honestly, the interpretation that you're giving together with the lawyers is an accurate one, but I can hear the argument now that Democrats would make that implicit in that word in the statute, election, is not just the casting of votes, Fred, but including the counting of votes to actually determine the election. And until that's done, the election, they will say, is incomplete. What would you say to that?
Well, they could argue that, and they may well, that there's other language in there that says until someone is duly elected. Well, Republicans argue that, of course, that, well, somebody's elected on Election Day. Even if there's a recount that takes days or weeks, somebody's been elected that day, and it's just an effort to determine it. Look, I think if Brown wins, it's going to be very hard. I think other Democratic senators would balk at allowing Paul Kirk to vote. And secondly, then there's the House of Representatives. It will be such an important political event, Brown winning, a Republican in Massachusetts, with health care as the main issue, that I think Nancy Pelosi in the House will have trouble drumming up the 218 votes. If he wins, I think more likely health care is simply dead, because this will be such a political bombshell.
What are you saying, though, Fred? Are you saying that a bunch of Democrats in the House who previously voted in favor of health care will suddenly get a case of the for reals, realizing that they're up for re-election in a few months, and they're going to switch their votes?
Indeed. Well, look, Nancy Pelosi's already down to 218 votes. She got 220 before, but Bob Wexler from Florida, a Democrat, has resigned to take a different job. And Joseph Gow, the Republican elected from New Orleans, the leaders of the Republican there in the House believe that he'll switch his vote this time. So she's down to 218. If she loses a single vote, then health care is not going to carry in the House. So, but look, I mean, if there's so many Democrats on the edge here in the House that I think it's bound to tip there. And besides, is this the way you want to enact a sweeping piece of legislation? You're sneaking under the election.
Well, but you heard Anthony Weiner say our strategy is to stall, and that might be perceived as chicanery, and that might backfire. We'll have to leave it at that. Fred Barnes, great analysis in your column here about the legal implications. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Greg.